What's up, guys? As always, we're welcome to Under One Roof with Josh. I'm Josh. Big super thank you to have you guys here tuning in again. It's been probably about 7 weeks since my last podcast, beginning of June. Got a bit of a tick bite and it kind of put me down for a while. I was in and out of work and really didn't have a whole lot of time to do some content or anything like that. Fevers, bronchitis, a bunch of other stuff. It's all better now. We're on the mend. We're coming back. And first thing I want to do is get a podcast out. This one's going to be a little different. This one's going to be a little bit about my life story. We're going to dive deep into where I came from and how I got where I am. And this is pretty much every time I tell this story, it's a comeback story. And people ask me to talk about this. They ask me to, share what I know, what I've been through. So we're going to go ahead and do that. So we're going to start, I grew up on a small farm in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Some of you may have heard of it. There was a huge battle there at some point. I don't know, just joking. But I grew up there, grew up on a farm. We rented, my stepdad was a farmer for the person we rented from. We had about 110 head of cattle on our farm at one point in time. And then, grew up fairly, I would say we were okay. We had everything we needed. We weren't rich, that's for sure, but we weren't also, poor and homeless. We had everything we needed. My parents made sure that they took care of me and my stepbrother as best they could, and then as I grew up, I became my own person. So got in a lot of trouble in school. I had my first kid when I was 17 years old, my first daughter. So school didn't really stick too well for me. Found construction work shortly after that. And a little bit later, when I was 22 years old, I got married. I had my oldest son, Jordan. And then roughly 2 years later, I was separated, living by myself. Things didn't work out the way I thought they would. I became a man of God, and that all kind of fell apart just by my actions. I couldn't keep a job, and me and the mother could not get along. We tried very hard, never worked. So I left. At that point in time, I had a job as a lumber mill manager, moved to a small town, and, kept living life. And living life was not the greatest. I was young. I was put in charge of a lumber mill at the time, and I had several people I was in charge of, and I just took advantage of that like nobody's business. So the following year, ended up year or two later, ended up getting laid off. At that time, I was in a relationship with another girl. When I got laid off, got evicted. And roughly shortly after I got evicted, found out I was having my third kid. So it was a bit trying. That summer of 2009 was tough. I was working as security, quote unquote, bar security, glorified term for bouncer. And, I worked out a lot. I moved in with family. Luckily, they took me in. It wasn't the best circumstances, but, I'm blessed that they did. I was living in a basement in my aunt's house and, working wherever I could find work. I worked in warehouses. I worked in some factories. Just nothing stuck. The only thing that stuck was the bar life. And that's unfortunately where I focused all my energy. Every Friday, Saturday, Sunday night, I was working security. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, when I was supposed to be working a real job, the security job always trumped it because it's where I wanted to be in the bar life. After a few months, things started going pretty south. The girl that I was in a relationship with when I got evicted, her and I couldn't get along, which led to a lot of fighting, a lot of disgruntledness. And finally, in December of 2009, my son was born. And this was my third child. Now, this is 3 kids, not married. And I was at a low point in my life. It was the second week in December, December 2009, and I decided that I was going to end my life. I called my ex-wife up, apologized everything that I did to her, because I was a pretty nasty human being to her. I wrote a note in a Bible for my oldest son, and I was at peace with it. At that point, I'd figured, I had done everything I could to destroy my life, and I didn't want my kids finding out about a lot of it. I wanted them to, it was much easier for me to justify if they just said, well, Dad's not here anymore. So it was a choice I made. I was content with the choice as well. It wasn't one where it was a back and forth and I struggled with it. It was, I've done everything I needed to do or wanted to do, and there's no need to continue. I saw no path forward, saw no way out. So I had it planned. There's a covered bridge outside of Gettysburg, Pennsylvania called Sachs Covered Bridge. And it's haunted, quote unquote. I've seen some things there. We won't get into that in this podcast, but some stuff you can't, answer. But there's always stories about how the Confederate soldiers at the time would drown deserters, or you'd hear of drownings that happened there. And at that point, I felt like I was a coward and a deserter, and that's where I was going to end my life. So I did pick an evening. I didn't have to work that evening, and decided I'm going to head on out there. Didn't tell nobody about it. I just got in my car and went. About halfway there, I get a text message from, of course, a girl I've been talking to, and she had no idea about anything that's going on. We weren't in a relationship at that time. And all the text message was, hey, I haven't heard from you in a while. I'm here if you need to talk. Now, talking normally meant, quote unquote, we're not going to get into what that meant, but, that always meant something else. So I drove to her house and ended up spending the night. Just a little side note, we're still together 17 years later, got married 2 years ago, so it was definitely the right call. But anyway, so I spent the night there, and 3 days later, she called me, or I called her, I'm sorry, and said that, hey, I want to talk. So sat down with her that evening and kind of just spilled the guts. Everything about my past, everything, where I thought that was going to be no good for anybody, the works. I was basically at rock bottom. I was below rock bottom. And she looked me dead in the eye and she's like, that's not bad at all. Which blew me away, because every other single person I explained this to, talked to, or walked through was like, we don't know how you're going to come back from this. This is just detrimental to you. You're never going to be anything. And that wasn't the case with this person. This person actually said, hey, that's not that bad. We can get through this together. So the first thing I did is I showed her where I lived. First thing she said to me goes, I don't care if we're in a relationship or not. You're moving in with me. You're never going to live here again. It was just not a very healthy environment for someone who has asthma living in a basement. So moved in with her. She helped me get my first real job that I held for a long time, 1 year. Woohoo! But I became a bartender. Never thought about doing service like that. I was never that kind of person, outgoing whatsoever. And then I started meeting some people, and the place that I was being security or bouncer at, the owner kind of took a liking to me. And to this day, I swear Nico has saved my life for sure. But he helped me out in a big way. Now, moving in with her came with some consequences. I was not a good person, so there were a few times that I had troubles with run-ins with the law. Law caught up to me real quick. There was a few times where I'd have to, face the music, go and pay fines. A few times I was drug out by handcuffs and taken to places because I had literally destroyed my life. So I had to build that back up. And I was very lucky. I didn't have to do jail time, and they weren't real big serious charges. So I was able to work my way back out of that system, and I did very hard, diligently. But I had help. And that help is what was like a cornerstone of my progress, and even to where I'm at today. Because at that time, nobody wanted to help me. When I say I was a bad person, I don't want to get into those details, but I was bad. So I started getting a little help, and a little help here and there. And what that started doing was giving consistency to me, which I hadn't had in years. Basically, by them helping me, I started to help myself. So I stuck with bartending. I ended up getting another job that was outside of town, inside of town, became a bar manager of one of the local spots. Did that for 1.5 years till that closed. Then got into factory work. Couple different factories. Mainly, I stuck with one window company, which we name. And then I went from there to a 5-year stint at another factory where I worked my way up from a mixer operator to a forklift operator to running some machinery to typing some stuff up to third shift production manager. At that point, I had really grinded and got to where I wanted to be. However, my sins of the past were still haunting me, so I had to have more than one job. Got out of the bar scene, started taking summer jobs, working at campgrounds, winter jobs, working at retail stores. Just wasn't able enough to get ahead. I was maintaining just fine. My girlfriend and I, or she's now my wife, we did what we could to make it through. In those first early years, there were times where, I'd have to give my son to my parents so that way we could go a weekend without electricity because we didn't have enough to pay the bill. Fun fact, I had a health condition, and luckily within 24 hours, they would turn the electricity back on. But there was never any guarantee on that. So if it got shut off on a Friday, we didn't know if by Monday or Tuesday we'd have electricity. So luckily my parents were able to take my son, and me and Tasha, my wife, we went through it together. We call them our camping nights. We have an air mattress blown up and some candles, and we did everything we could to make the best of that situation. So fast forward to 2018, I'm working 2 to 3 jobs trying to maintain enough to support my family along with my wife working. Just wasn't enough, so we decided to take a jump to Virginia Beach. Virginia Beach, I don't know if any of you guys know too much about it, but it's a very much skill set area, meaning they hire down there and other places based off your skill set. Well, I didn't have a skill set. One of the things I was good at was working hard. That was it. But I never took the time to cultivate a administration type skill set or leadership type skill set or carpenter or welder. And a lot of those skill sets down there, the trades, you kind of had to have that history. But I got lucky. I met a guy named Kyle McLean, and he worked for Baker Roofing at the time, and huge company in the South, and he took a chance on me and ended up working out really well in my favor. He hired me as a project manager. I interviewed in a tank top and board shorts because I wasn't expecting to have the interview. The interview lasted 2.5 hours. We hit it off, and then within a few weeks later, we were moving down south to Virginia Beach. From there, my career pretty much took off. I got, centered around a bunch of people that their work ethic was way better than mine. So I started adapting some of them trends, waking up early, making sure, tomorrow's stuff is done today. So that way I'm a step ahead. Customers, learning about roofing. I knew about roofing. I'd done siding and roofing here and there. Siding was more my forte. So when I got into roofing, I got very lucky. I met some great people like Kyle, Bill, and Luke that really took their time to show me how roofing's done. Then I got to work with some great partners like Chris and Nick, and both those guys to this day are still, I consider, some of my good friends. And they taught me how to do roofing. So it was an amazing experience because I had my siding, but then I learned how to do multifamily projects. I learned how to plan. And the more I learned, the more I kept wanting to do more and just getting more and feeding off of more. So then I went to another company where I became operations manager. So I worked with the sales team and I worked with the production team, and we helped build that company up. And that was an amazing experience. It was a little tried and tested. I don't know exactly how to explain it, but it was tough. There was some back and forth, but they were great because it helped motivated everybody in the proper direction. And then an opportunity came at the company I'm currently at here in Maryland. And basically they had hired me while I was in Virginia Beach to run their roofing division, which they were trying to get up and going. They were testing the water, seeing if it was going to be good. Didn't really get a good ground start, but whenever I wasn't busy, they brought me up to Maryland, and I would help in Maryland. And I would do the same things that I was taught how to do at other places. I would work hard. I'd get a step ahead. I'd build teams, build crews, train people. And from there, it just took off. So they invited me up to work there full time. Me and my family moved from Virginia Beach, which was tough. We were 9 minutes from the ocean, 9 minutes from the bay, and about 7 minutes from Krispy Kreme, which I love me some Krispy Kreme. But anyway, so we moved up to Maryland, and I started as production manager, which meant I was just running exterior crews, exterior teams. And then eventually I got director of production, regional director of production, which now I'm in charge of the branches from Pennsylvania to Florida. And it's the same thing. It's just building teams, building careers, building is what I love to do. Like teamwork, leadership, strengths, putting all that in there. But all that came into fruition from a text message in 2009. Because I'm adamant, I was done. I'd given up everything I had. But then when it came time to start building that back up, and once I learned and understood how to do it, I outworked everybody. I can remember a few times where Nick, who was working with me, would be like, "Why are you walking so fast? Where are you going? Or what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Hey man, I got a point I need to get to. I got this going on. I want to get this done before I have to go do this." And a lot of people were like, "Oh, that just looks like busy work." But then I would have time to where I could breathe. Then I would be set up for success. So if anything else happened, I'd be covered. When I was a production director here at the company I'm working with now, I would build my teams to start thinking for themselves. Here's where the standards we need to hit. I'd set that standard. I'd hold them to that standard, which then allowed me to have more time to learn about sales, learn about marketing. And I mean, look at me, I'm doing podcasting and content right now. How many regional directors out there do you see doing stuff like that? But all that came from that hard work that I had to learn. And I had to outwork everybody. Even in my field today, when you put me in a room and next to somebody else that's in the same position, I'm going to outwork them. It's just how I'm built. And, it's that hard work. It's that work ethic that you got to build on. And a lot of people get a taste of it and then they're okay. Some people like me, I get a taste of it. Now I'm addicted. Now I want to outwork anybody. Anybody listening to this podcast, I want to drive and push you to be successful. Drive and push you to get better. I got friends that I text. Every week I send out a Monday morning text. Send it to about 40 different people. That text message is motivational, or it's inspiring, or however you want to say it. That all came from a text message I got in 2009 from one person who saved my life with that text message. And I'm hoping that maybe there's a text message I can send weekly that'll help somebody struggling that wants to get to where I'm at or get to the next level. I can honestly say I came from the bottom, and I'm still growing. I still got ways to go. I still have plenty of ambition. But if I can crawl myself out, if I can work myself up to being the type of person that can walk into any room and feel confident that you know what I'm talking about, or that I can show you that I know what I'm talking about, or prove to you that I know what I'm talking about, anybody else can do it. It just takes hard work and it takes effort, and you have to get after it. So big thank you to anybody that's listening to this podcast. This is kind of a little bit deeper than what I normally would do, but I've had a few people request the story and they thought it would be good that I get it out there. So just remember, no matter where you're at, whatever spot you're in life, there's ways to work out of it. And you just got to have the confidence. You got to have the composure. And if you got a team that you can build around you, I'd highly recommend that. I still talk to the bar manager from back in the day that helped get me straight. I still talk to the constables that came in and took me out of my girlfriend at the time's apartment. I still talk to some of the friends that were around me and encouraging me and pushing me and driving me. Still talk to Kyle, still talk to Nick, still talk to Luke, still talk to those guys because they remember my core foundation. And, I built on top of the things they taught me. So I don't ever want to disappoint them or my wife. So I'll push it. And you can too. I mean, it just takes that step to say, this is where I want to go and this is where I want to be. So big thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please comment, share. I know we've been a bit inconsistent, so let's get back to, I'll get back to getting consistent for you guys. And I'll talk to you again next week. Thank you guys.